How's it going?
Hey everyone. I don't know about all of you, but we've been getting a funny feeling about that Halbrand guy who watched episode 4 of The Rings of Power. So let's hit the intro.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
All right, welcome everybody. If it's your first time here, we are two dads who love all things fandom out there, from Star Wars to Star Trek, Marvel to DC, and Middle-earth on down to Westeros. We love it all, and we want to bring all of our insights and love of all things nerdy to you, our viewers. So if that's your cup of int draft, we're here for you, and you should subscribe to our channel. It helps us out a lot and helps our other amazing folks like you find the show. So thanks for tuning in. My name is Chris Matthews. My co-host is...
Matt Parham, glad to be here, brother. How you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. You guys might know him as the Stranger as well in this show. So, hidden cameo.
All right.
So, let's get into the review. Whoop, woo! So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 4, titled The Great Wave. Oh, and if you've read any of the books or know any of the lore, you know exactly what that means. No spoilers here, though. We're not going to do that on this show. But The Great Wave was directed by Wayne Che Yip. Once again, he directed another pretty stellar episode, spoiler alert, written by Stephanie Folsom, J.D. Payne, and Patrick McKay. So... I don't know about you, but I really did like this episode. It answered a lot of the questions that I was having. And it's really an episode that sets up the chessboard. And every actor is definitely bringing their A game with this episode. So
Once again, amazing. Gosh, these actors.
Yeah. So many, too. Ensemble cast that they have here, and they're doing such a good job with this. Once again, guys, of course, I always have to look up the Rotten Tomatoes score. At first, whenever I watched this episode on Friday, the Rotten Tomatoes score was 100%. As of today, it kind of went down a bit, so it's at 81% right now on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's what we're sitting at. So some of the reviewers are having, some issues with it. One, the critic consensus that they have here is it says that The Great Wave is an awkwardly sluggish midpoint for a season still searching for momentum. But you heard my dog in the background.
I thought that there was plenty of action in there, and it just had anything, including momentum. I mean, it was packed with stuff.
Oh, yeah. But, this, and it says, but the slow pacing doesn't wash away glittering virtues like awe-inspiring visuals and impressively detailed world building on there. So that was the critic consensus on Rotten Tomatoes. So, I feel like the critics are kind of nitpicking at this point. I absolutely love this episode. I thought this was just as good as any of the other ones. And so let's get on with our review here at Fatherly Fandom. We're not critics here. We're just two guys that really enjoy fandom, really enjoy movies and television shows. So for this episode, we see Queen Regent Muriel, played by Cynthia Addai Robinson. She's plagued with nightmares at the beginning of that Great Flood, which is what the title is called. And we find out later in the episode that the King Tar Palantir is weak and dying. And I really looked around. I couldn't find the actor's name. For King Palantir, Tar Palantir. I couldn't find it anywhere, so did you find it, Matt?
No, it escaped me as well. And I was trying to give as much credit to all the actors that were doing such an amazing job in this episode that I didn't include the guy that laid in bed the whole time.
Yeah, that's true. It was a short scene, I guess. So
right.
So Queen Muriel shows Galadriel the Palantir. We've seen this before, guys, right? In Lord of the Rings. And Galadriel sees firsthand for herself the future, which we
what a
know
cool
happens.
Little effect too. Whenever she's, the vision is expanding out of the ball and all that.
Out of the ball, it was such a cool scene to see that, and it's something different than what we saw in the original movies as well. So the queen tells Galadriel the reason she wasn't welcome was because she was the first part of that prophecy. So we know now why she wasn't welcomed into Numenor. It's signaling Numenor's doom here. And another reason, and if you know any of the books and everything, one of the things that the Numenorians grew tired of over the years was the idea that they had this jealousy towards the Valar, the elves and everything, because they were immortal. And even though they had longer lives, the Numenorians did, and they were living 300, 400 years, they still were jealous that they died. So that's one of the big chasms that developed between elves and men of Numenor in that age. So that's kind of another reason why there's a lot of folks in Numenor that are kind of anti-elf.
They sprinkle that right in there with the crowd talking about those exact things.
Yeah, and you have the politicians kind of politicking it up there, trying to walk that line as well. So, and once again, I love it. We got to go back to Khazad-dûm this week, and we got to see more interactions between Elrond, who's played by Robert Aramayo, and Prince Durin, played by Owen Arthur. I love those two actors. I love their performances of these characters. And I thought for sure that the shiny MacGuffin that we saw in the first couple episodes, that Prince Durin showed his father, King Durin III, who's played by Peter Mullen, was going to be the Arkenstone. Did you think that was going to be the Arkenstone, Matt?
No, you know what? I thought
You
they
didn't.
were going to. No, I thought they were going to flip everything on its head and actually
And
have
they did.
one of the rings already made. I thought we were
Oh,
going to
man.
see one
The
of the
fan
rings of power sitting right there.
Backlash would be insane if they did that. That would be like the nail in the coffin if that was a ring of power already made before Celebrimbor even made the forge or anything. That would be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on here, guys?
Playing with expectations a little bit, and so I keep looking for some condensing of storylines, and I thought, oh, maybe they'll do that, but turns out it's Mithril all along.
Yep. Turns out it's actually Mithril. At this point, it looks like they're trying to mine it, but it's dangerous to do, and they stop the operation after three dwarfs get caught down there. Luckily, Durin was up there with Elrond at the time, so he didn't get collapsed in the cave, as it were. And I still absolutely love the friendship between Elrond and Durin, and all the more since Prince Durin shared this major secret with him too, friend to friend, both placing their hands on the mountain rock and
What
swearing.
A cool scene.
Yeah. I love that.
Wasn't that awesome?
I thought for sure that they were going to have this secret throughout at least this first season or whatnot, and it was going to be a big point. But it ended up being something that he told him right away, which was awesome. It was awesome that you could see their friendship, rekindling this friendship and growing stronger than ever. So I really did appreciate that.
Yeah, I gotta say, just because it totally reminded me, like in that scene, I thought Chris and I have done something along these lines, knowing each other
on a
as long
rock?
as we have. Well, I'm just saying, like, you share secrets with each other that you think is so important. I can like vaguely remember high school. We probably had some moment like, okay, man, I'm going to tell you something that happened at work, or I'm going to tell you something that happened at school today. You got to swear not to tell anybody on your life, on your mother's life, on whatever.
There's still things I I know that I haven't told
Take
anybody.
to the grave, right? But it was definitely one of those moments, and I thought, how authentic. He's kind of they've been friends forever, and he's being almost a little childish by making him place the hand up there. But I thought it was such a good scene.
Yeah. It also does a really good job of just showing how important the mountain is to dwarves in general. It's like this is their holy of holies kind of thing too. So just brilliant job with all of that. And finally, we get to see Adar in all of his glory here. And sure enough, he's an elf. Arondir, played by Ishmael Cruz Cordova, the beautifully eyed elf that we see, asks him why the orcs call him father. But he doesn't respond at this point. But they probably call him father because he might actually be their father. In the books and everything, in the movie, Saruman actually explains this. He says that the orcs were elves once, taken by the dark powers, tortured and mutilated, a terrible, ruined form of life. So he might actually be. It would be interesting to see if we get to see that in live action too, that process. of him making these orcs or not, but who knows if that'll actually happen. We see Adar, he has a burned down mentality. Adar explains that Arondir has been told a bunch of lies, and the only way to sift through all the lies is by tearing everything apart, essentially. So he wants to just tear down everything. And that's kind of in line with Morgoth more than Sauron. Once again, I don't think that this character is Sauron. And the actor who actually plays Adar is Joseph Mali. When he showed up, he looked so familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. What I saw him in before.
Well, Joseph Mali also plays Uncle Benjen, Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Good old
the actor.
Jon Snow's uncle.
Yes, the actor played Benjen Stark in Game of Thrones. Eddard Stark's brother, too, and Man of the Night's Watch. And Jon Snow looked up to him, got to talk to him a bunch of times in there. But yeah, that's where we've seen him before. Once again, these fantasies coming together like that. Same thing with Elrond and young Eddard Stark as well, so pretty cool to see that once again, coming full circle, full ringers, we like to say. So we'll keep an eye out for that kind of stuff in these episodes going forward, and we'll point those out for the actors that have shared fantasy roles like that going forward as well. So stay tuned for all of that. And I love that these characters have such a rich context. I like that Adar surprisingly lets Arondir go to tell the men of the tower to submit and lay down their claim of the land. It was so cool to see Theo's side story too, that the young boy and everything. And we see he's got good intentions, but man, I really have a bad feeling about this character, man. I don't know about you. When they go out to the old town to find food, the orcs find him right away. And of course they do. And they see the sword that he's carrying. And when we come to find out that the sword only appears when he stabs himself with the hilt. So whenever he stabbed himself like that, it started to pull out, which we saw a little bit before in a previous episode where the blood was trickling on it, and you saw that sword forming. So I was right about that situation. And we see that we kind of get confirmation at this point that Adar is actually looking for this. This is the MacGuffin that he wants to find. For whatever reason, this is very important to him. There's some theories out there saying that this might be like a Morgul blade, like the one that Frodo was stabbed with in Fellowship of the Ring. Something like that. So what do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I didn't think about that part of it, but, we see that in the Fellowship of the Ring. Very well could be, this iteration's version of that. I don't know. It's hard to say. My theories continue to change on the mystery of this show, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Right. But they are laying it on pretty thick. They keep the mysteries growing and having all of these individual threads. I hope that they can rein them all in at some point.
It feels like they are. It feels like they're keeping track of all this stuff, and things are slowly coming together and making sense. And I can't wait to see further episodes to see where they go with that and how they get to certain places. Because, all of us fans of Lord of the Rings probably know most of this lore and know where this is going to end up. So we know what's coming, but we don't know how it's going to actually take place in this show, which was just fun. And the writers are doing a very good job of walking that tightrope of sticking to the lore, being honorable to what has been written, but as well, like making it their own and making these characters their own and providing some mystery too. They're doing a very good job of providing mystery in this show. And it was so crazy to me, when they show Theo up in the watchtower and you get that old grizzled man who finally got a shirt, by the way. I'm glad that he got clothes. And we see that he knows about this sword and everything. And we get the impression that like he is an agent of Sauron. And that is like, oh man, what craziness is going to come from this? And that makes total sense too, because the men of the Southland actually were on the side of Morgoth. And those people fought against the Elves and the Edain that were become the Numenorians and everything. Those are the men that sided with the Elves. So it makes sense that a couple of the people in there would actually be siding with Sauron. It's interesting to see that dynamic, and I can't wait to see where that goes. And so we're stuffed, man, this episode, we are stuffed with new information. And by the end of the episode, we see Queen Muriel is sending Galadriel off. And I love this. This is probably my favorite scene of the episode. And so she gets in her ship and she's rowing away. And all of a sudden we see the petals of Nimloth, that white tree that's over there in Numenor, falling in mass. It's crazy. And Muriel's look on her face, the fright during this gave so much weight to this scene too. And she looks back at Elendil and it's just like, oh my God, what did I do? The way that the tree works is if it loses its leaves and everything, that's kind of like the Valar, which are the spirits, the gods of this world, showing disapproval of what these Numenorians are doing. So when it fell in mass, all the leaves like that, they knew that the Valar were unhappy with them, with this decision to let Galadriel go. And so she changes her mind, and what we get to see is Galadriel and these Numenorians raise an army to go to Middle-earth. And who volunteers to go to Middle-earth? Isildur. So he's going to be there along with his friends. They're going to raise an army here and go to the Southland. So again, these pieces are moving into position. The chessboard is being laid out for what we're going to get to see later on in this show. So for me, I'm going to give this episode a 9 out of 10. All in all, I love this episode, and we got a lot of answers to the questions this week. The only thing I missed seeing was the Harfoots. We didn't get to see the Harfoots this time around. And if we had, probably give this a 10 out of 10. So what do you think, Matt? What are some of your thoughts on this episode?
Well, yeah, I was very impressed. It was hard to narrow down what I liked the most, but I got to call out the cinematography in this episode. Aaron Morton was the one responsible for these magnificent shots all throughout. Even just the personal conversations, I thought, were framed very well. The shots, of course, of the great wave coming in, showing so much detail and planning of what you would see and where.
That was just
amazing. Yeah, and then it comes to parts of the show like the forest chase and how all of that slowed down. So reminiscent of the scene in Fellowship of the Ring where the hobbits are being chased, right?
I absolutely love that scene of Arondir when he came into the shot and grabs that arrow right next to Theo, who's about to hit him, and then uses it to shoot back to the orcs.
Legolas moment, and my wife said
Incredible.
That like they're just giving him so many elf-like things to do. They're making an emphasis on these differences in the races, and how Elrond can see really far, and he uses that ability.
He does.
Arondir walking on the chains last week, and it's just amazing. So the forest chase was probably one of my favorite parts of the episode. And again, very well acted. The cinematography was on point. The lighting, they coming out into that meadow and the clouds break. I mean, it provides such a different feel than anything else that you're watching out there in this same genre that I love it. It sets itself apart the way that the old trilogy set itself apart. And I found out part of the reason why a lot of the crew, of course, with Weta, is also veterans from their work on the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. But specifically, I was interested to find that the prosthetic designer was the same guy as who had designed the orcs in the Lord of the Rings, at least the Fellowship of the Ring. And they're making it feel very much like a part of the Lord of the Rings sort of cinematic universe at this point.
Absolutely.
And some of that, has to do with the design of the creatures that we're seeing in there. Jamie Wilson, the prosthetic designer on this and I believe all of the episodes, right, Chris, for this first season?
Yeah, not just these episodes, though, too, right?
No, Lord of the Rings alum. He worked on the Fellowship of the Ring movie as well as the Hobbit series. Yeah. And so I know whenever I was watching the scene at the very beginning, whenever the orc is laying injured and
me too. The detail on that character.
The detail. You almost
it looks real to me.
It looks real. You can tell emotion in the eyes, and
Yeah, I felt a little sympathetic for an orc in that situation, and Adar
right.
over there
Yeah.
putting his hand on his head and everything, and then stabbing him like
Mhm.
that. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Great moment. There was just so many of them
Right.
in this episode, and so I was very impressed with all of the acting. The standouts for me, though, like you were saying, Joseph Mawley,
Oh yeah.
the Queen Regent, Cynthia Ada Robinson, Galadriel, man, Morfydd Clark coming at it again, just
Hmm.
willpower of steel. She
Man.
will not be stopped.
When she was
It's
stepping
amazing
up to
watch.
the Queen Regent, that power that she had and that
Yeah.
authority, like it shined through. So yeah, Morfydd Clark, you are doing a great job. Hats off. And once again, like the shining star for me in this episode was Cynthia Adai Robinson, the Queen Regent Muriel. She just killed it this episode.
Oh yeah, so restrained.
Yeah.
Felt regal, felt royal the entire time,
Mhm.
but you could see just this conflict going on inside. The eyes. I don't know how,
Everything.
but this is why professional actors are of a different
Yeah.
class. They are professionals for a reason because they can do this kind of thing
Mhm.
without any words. I mean, you could see the struggle she was going through.
Right. And I once again, like, I feel sympathetic towards a lot of these characters. I feel like, you were just talking about the orc. I felt sympathy towards that character. I feel very much sympathy towards Queen Regent Muriel because, and, spoiler alert, if you know anything about Lord of the Rings, you know that there's going to be hard times ahead for this character, and she's not always going to be in charge. And this decision that they make in this episode is directly correlated to what happens later. So it's tragic, but she did the right thing too, I believe. So it was beautifully done by her.
That's what's so interesting about this show is because we know ultimately where it's all going to go.
Yeah.
And as a contrast to Game of Thrones, where our House of the Dragon, where same thing, we know where the story is headed. In that show, we see a bunch of people in high positions in this class of fantasy making terrible decisions and suffering the repercussions. In this, Rings of Power, we see the opposite, where characters are constantly stuck with multiple options, a lot of them bad choices, and they end up siding on the best choice that they know to make in the moment, but it ends up being terrible down the road. The repercussions don't work out.
And that's the most tragic part about it. It's like, well, I would have probably made the same decision in that moment as well. But it's going downhill from here, ladies and gentlemen. Just be prepared. Be prepared.
I also want to take just a moment to call out one of the smaller roles of Volandil, which is Isildur's friend. He's played by Alex Tarrant. And I got to say, just a few scenes that he was in, I really felt like his life goal had just been completely ripped away from him.
And he says that.
Ruined.
He's like, I worked my entire life to get this position, and because of you, I don't get to do that now. You ruined everything. So
yeah. And I feel like he just delivered.
Damn Isildur, man. If he would just make better decisions, if he would just make better decisions, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about Lord of the Rings or Ring of Power, but he's the reason for all this.
I don't know if Volandil comes up in the books at all or if there's a role for him, but if they continue to have this actor play a part in the overall story, it would be really interesting to see where he ends up because of this very decision of Isildur's. It's almost like he's doomed by somebody else's choice.
Isildur's Bane, man. He's a
right. So
just a cursed
where
fella.
it all ends up. But it was a powerful episode. It had so much good going for it. I am same with you. Going to rate it a 9 out of 10.
We agree.
I absolutely enjoyed every minute of it.
Good.
I do think there are still lingering questions out there.
Of course, yeah.
That are part of the mystery. It's not necessarily disruptive to how much I'm enjoying the episode, but there are also, and I don't know if you caught this, Chris. I know I didn't until I was reading up on some articles about the show, but apparently Narsil could have been featured in this very episode, and it was briefly in the background as they're walking into the other room from the king's chambers, about to go to see the Palantir. Apparently there was a sword leaning up against the wall with the hilt of Narsil.
Yeah.
And
I think I caught that, and I kind of had that question in my head too, because I've been looking in Numenor to see where Narsil is and everything.
Right.
But
yeah, if it's even made yet. But some are claiming that this was the sword, which if that is, I mean, it's a small detail and seems kind of a weird way to introduce such an important part in the whole overall lore.
Well, Elendil's got to get that sword, right? At some point, he's got to get that, and then Isildur's the one that takes his father's sword and cuts off the hand or the fingers of Sauron to get the ring. So, yeah, at some point, we got to see Elendil get that sword. So maybe before they leave for Middle Earth, he'll be given it, I guess. Maybe. But then again, why did the queen give him that other sword then when he took the task of
exactly? That's what I was kind of confused
Galadriel
about. Right.
So
So
I don't know.
But there's a lot of things like that, little strings here and there that we're hoping will pay off overall. Some of them we've discussed outside of this show, like who in the heck is Halbrand?
Matt has an incredible theory about Halbrand, and it's hard to argue against it, and I really do think that you got something here, Matt. So why don't you tell the audience all about your Halbrand theory? Right.
Well, I looked it up afterwards, and you and I were talking after last week's show.
Yeah.
And I was rewatching some of the episodes and going, man, this is just kind of crazy. There's a couple of shots of Halbrand as he was walking past the forge in Numenor, the blacksmith area, and he just has this odd smirk on his face, which it already caught me as a little odd. Like, why is he interested?
He's very interested in becoming a blacksmith. Yeah. He says he has a skill in that. So
exactly, he tells the guy that's working there, "Hey, I can make you the best out of whatever you want to make," which we know that Sauron possesses this ability.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, Halbrand, as far as I can tell, is not a character that we've seen from the book. So
he's not. He's a new invention.
He's a new invention, but how poetic would it be that this is the guy that saves Galadriel's life? She meets him, and he immediately, the first thing that he says is that their fates are intertwined as he's pulling her out of the water and coming on to the little makeshift raft that a bunch of the shipwrecked victims and him share. And then the second line that he says in the entire season is that looks can be deceiving. And it just seemed like such a weird line to throw in there, but something that I could imagine coming back later in like a flashback sort of situation where Galadriel finally figures it out. But
it would be very poetic because this guy that she is searching for, Sauron, and dead set, and has refused to go back to Valinor for, is the person that she meets up in the water. The very first person that pulls her out of the water is Sauron, and the one that she's with all this time. And it would be interesting to see, and I don't know how they're going to thread this needle, because I was talking last episode about Aladar, this elf that is very helpful to the elves and everything, that ends up being Sauron, that helps him forge the rings and whatnot. But they can make that character into whatever they want. So maybe Halbrand gets back to Middle Earth with them, and they fight with them against Adar and whatnot. And he's like, "Look, I'm not a man. I'm really an elf." And he reveals himself as an elf or something. And then he goes and helps Kalambor with the rings of power and everything. And eventually what we know from Sauron is he lives in Numenor after he's captured once again. So after the Numenorians fight for the first time, this was before Lord of the Rings and whatnot, they capture Sauron, bring him back to Numenor, and eventually he deceives his way into being an advisor for the king and whatnot. So he kind of plays a big part in the downfall of Numenor, and it ends up destroying Numenor. And this is the part where we get to see the Great Wave. This is an actual fruition of that. And he actually dies. His living body dies, and his spirit goes back to Middle Earth. And that's where he has he becomes the Sauron that we know of in Lord of the Rings.
Right. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that
definitely not out of the realm.
Plus, in this episode, Chris, did you notice that they place this emphasis on the vision being initiated by Galadriel coming to Numenor? Right?
Yeah,
but Halbrand
was right there too.
Right.
Yeah, and he was the one that instructed her on how to get out of prison and go up there and talk to him. He was manipulating Galadriel. Like, what human can manipulate elves like that?
Well, he's already manipulated the queen and her current advisor.
And that's something that we know Sauron does later too. So, yeah. It's a solid theory. That's a theory that you're going to hear here on Fatherly Fandom. So we'll keep track of this as the show goes on to see if it comes to fruition. I mean, but this is I'm very interested in this theory. And whenever you watch this with that lens, I've rewatched the first couple episodes, and you can definitely see this in that character. So it's a good one, Matt. It's a good one.
Yeah, we'll see. And like I said, I'm not the only one out there that's following this. So there have been some other people that have seen, if there are clues, them there. So we'll see how it all develops. Yeah,
and I heard a lot of most of the theories that I'm hearing about Halbrand is that he'll be the Witch King of Angmar, is what they're saying he'll be. And so I haven't seen a whole lot of them say that he is Sauron himself.
Right.
So it's quite a surprise if that's what we get in the show. And I think that would be a good one. That's a good writing moment right there if they decide to make Halbrand into Sauron. So I want to see that.
Well, that's what I was thinking after we talked about it, is, even if somehow we've predicted here, the big reveal, it's still a pleasure to watch it like this and, and see all the little things that they're throwing in. It's
that's the best part of this, theorizing about what's going to happen. And we get a lot of that with this show. And that's what I love about it too. And if you guys love that too, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, because we're talking about all this kind of stuff. And if you have a comment, a theory of your own, please comment below and let us know your theory, and we'll talk about it on the show too. And we'd like to interact with you guys as much as we can. So, Matt, do you have anything else for this episode before we depart these lands of Middle Earth?
No, just I hope everyone enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you, so please let us know what you think. And if you've got any other theories about any of the other characters, we want to hear those too.
Let us know. We'd love to talk about them. We'd love to talk about them with you too. So, from our families to yours,
have a good one.
Adios.